phone buzzed against the center console. The number was new, Iki, but the rhythm of the vibration felt hauntingly familiar. I didn't even need to open the message to know it was her. Ava always had a way of reaching out exactly when her world was falling apart, expecting me to be the safety net shed, already shredded. I need to talk today, it's important. It had been 15 months since the ink dried on our divorce papers. 15 months of absolute silence, and here she was, Fintel, trying to barge back into my life as if the last year hadn't happened. I didn't hesitate. I typed back, busy date night with your best friend. The reaction was instantaneous. First, the typing bubble appeared and vanished. Over, like she was struggling to contain a volcanic eruption. Then, my phone started screaming, font 12 messages in less than 90 seconds. Words like betrayal, disgusting, views, and you two deserve each other flashed across my screen. Then came a voicemail, which I immediately deleted without listening. Sloane climbed back into the truck, balancing 2 bags of Springs rolls and takeout containers. Perfect. She saw the notifications lighting up my screen and arched an eyebrow. Ava finally figured it out. Took her long enough. Are you okay, Nolan? Never better. And for the first time in years, I actually meant it. 24 hours later, her desperate reach for me would make total sense. Her boyfriend, the guy she left me for, had been arrested. And my name was somehow tangled in the middle of a massive federal investigation. But to understand how I ended up at the center of her disaster, you have to go back to that cold October night. It was 6:15 on a Thursday. I had spent 12 hours crawling through grease-covered commercial ductwork. Because one of my lead techs called in sick and a high-profile client was threatening to cancel our contract. My knees were screaming. Cole commercial VAC 12 employees, 40 active service contracts, and apparently, one wife who had been planning her exit behind my back for months. When I walked into our home, it was deathly quiet. No TV, or smells, no warmth. The only sound was the rhythmic ticking of that antique grandfather clock her mother gave us as a wedding gift 7 years ago. I found her in our bedroom. From it, surrounded by 3 matching seafoam-colored suitcases. She was folding a silk blouse with the meticulous focus of someone who had practiced this scene in her head a dozen times. She didn't even look up as I entered. Taking a trip? I asked, my voice raspy from a long day. She finally stopped, her face hardening into a mask of cold indifference. I'm taking my life back. Nolan, I want a divorce. I leaned against the doorframe. Perfect. My body too exhausted to manufacture the heartbreak she clearly expected. You're leaving on a Thursday? You couldn't even wait for the weekend. She looked at me then, her eyes devoid of the history we shared. This isn't a joke. Right. I know, I replied, gesturing to the luggage. Jokes are usually funny. This is just a lot of packing for someone who told me she was happy. Just 2 weeks ago. Her jaw tightened. Fusin, I've been unhappy. For years, you were always covered in grease, obsessing over compressor specs and quarterly profits you never saw me. I let out a dry, hollow laugh. Those compressors paid for your Pilates classes, that luggage far in the driveway, and the roof over your head. Ava! She smoothed her Hera telltale sign. She was about to recite a script she had rehearsed in front of her vanity mirror. See? Exactly it. You make everything about money. You have zero emotional depth. I've outgrown you, Nolan. The room felt cold. Is there someone else? She didn't answer. Silence is a loud confession. Who is it? It doesn't matter who it is. It matters to me, I said. Steady. 8 years of marriage. I think I've earned a name. She gripped the handle of her largest suitcase and dragged it toward the door. His name is Ian. He spat out. Ian Whitmore. My blood went cold, not from jealousy, but from recognition. Ian Whitmore was the commercial real estate shark who had tried to lowball me a year prior. He was the type to post toxic, hustle culture motivational quotes on LinkedIn while stiffing his contractors. The guy who tried to pay me an exposure for professional VAC services? I asked. She glared at me. He's a successful businessman. Vision. With a marketing budget, I countered. He wanted me to fix his condenser for free so he could give me a testimonial on his website. That's not business, Ava. That's a scam. She didn't care.
Eat.
She was already looking past me, past our house, and toward a fantasy. You're not even going to fight for me? She challenged, standing in the doorway. Why would I said, turning away to head toward the guest room.
Yoon.
Behind me, I heard a sound of pure frustrations. She wanted a scene, and I had given her a business transaction. I spent that night in the guest room, mapping out my future. I didn't fall apart. I liquidated.
Feeded.
I separated my finances, updated my business contracts, and focused on the work. While she was living the high life with Whitmore in his glass-walled penthouse, I was quietly thriving. I started spending time with Sloane, Finction, the one person who had been a true friend to both of us before the divorcee. One person who knew exactly how much Ava had been lying to me, but the real twist, the business success Ava fell for, was a house of cards.
Thanked.
24 hours after that text on Saturday, the news broke. Jude Whitmore was arrested for massive commercial fraud and embezzlement. When the feds seized his assets, they went through his digital records.
Found.
That he had been using my old client database, which Ava had stolen and handed over to him when she left to launder money through fake service contracts.
Fees.
My name was on the documents because she had forged my signature to authorize the service fees. I wasn't just a scorned ex-husband anymore. I was the target of a federal investigation. I didn't panic. I went to my lawyer, pulled every email, every invoice, and every GPS log from my work trucks that proved I had never been to those sites.
Fate.
I walked into the federal office with a file folder that destroyed their case against me and provided the smoking gun that locked Whitmore away for good. The day Ava called me, she wasn't asking for a reconciliation.
Beauty.
She was desperate because Whitmore's lawyers had told her that the only way to avoid prison time was to pin the administrative oversight on the original business owner,
Me to sign a false affidavit.
admitting I was the one who authorized the payments. When I sent that text date night with your best friend, she realized I already knew.
He realized.
I wasn't the grease-covered guy she could manipulate anymore. I was the guy who had spent the last 15 months preparing for this exact moment. The trial was short. Ava didn't walk away clean. She lost everything: clothes, the lifestyle, and her reputation. She ended up with a mountain of legal debt and a permanent blemish on her record. I watched from the back of the courtroom as she was led away, looking small and fragile, realizing that the emotional depth she accused me of lacking was actually the very thing that saved me. I walked out of the courthouse, and Sloane was waiting in the truck.
Fekshots. Just like that Saturday night.
She didn't ask if I was happy. She just handed me a coffee and started the engine. I looked at the house we had built, now sold to pay the legal fees, and then I looked at the road ahead.
You dut. Justice.
Isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's just the sound of a truck pulling away, leaving the wreckage behind for good. I finally had the life I worked for, and for the first time, it was entirely mine.
You.
The silence in the house was deafening, yet my mind was already racing, calculating the cost of a future I hadn't anticipated. While she surely imagined I would crumble into dust,
Yoon.
I was already laying the foundation for my next move. The following morning, I arrived at the shop before the sun had even thought about breaking the horizon.
Eels.
Nolan Coal Commercial Hayvac was housed in a cavernous warehouse on the edge of the industrial sector. It was 16,000 square feet of organized efficiency, a fleet of 8 service trucks,
Beaches.
and a reputation for being the only guys in town who actually showed up when they said they would. In this cutthroat industry, that kind of reliability is rarer than gold. Hector, my shop foreman, was already there.
Ferd. The first pot of coffee. When I pulled into the bay.
He had been my right hand since year 2, back when the company was just me, one beat-up van, and a level of optimism that bordered on professional suicide.
Thinned.
He was a man built like a fire hydrant.
Solid and unflinching.
He took one glance at my face, set his mug down, and didn't mince words. You look like the world chewed you up, spat you out.
Didn't even have the decency to leave a tip.
Ava moved out, I said, my voice steady, despite the hollowness in my chest. He didn't even blink. He just nodded.
Grim expression of someone who had been expecting the storm for years. About time,
he muttered. You aren't the least bit surprised? I asked, genuinely taken aback. Boss, I've been happily married for 31 years, he said, pouring a cup for me. I know what a contented wife looks like, and that woman hasn't looked at you with anything but cold indifference since we were still using the old R22 refrigerant units.
feels
He slid a clipboard containing the day's service logs across the desk. You want to vent about it? Or do you want to get to work? I want to work, I replied, grabbing the clipboard. That's what I like to hear.
threw myself into the day like my survival depended on it, because in a way, it did.
I repaired complex equipment, audited our inventory,
Evasion.
and made dozens of calls to vendors who were starting to get nervous about our payment cycles. The business wasn't failing, but it certainly wasn't thriving either. We were breaking even on most months,
Thing.
pulling ahead on the good ones, and dipping into our reserves during the slow ones. It was the kind of precarious financial tightrope that steals your sleep when you start overthinking it. Around 11 in the morning,
Fins.
my phone buzzed with a call from Donovan Briggs. Donnie operated 3 of the largest luxury car dealerships in the county and had been my most significant client for 4 years running. He provided steady, reliable work and always cleared his invoices within 30 days. Nolan, we need to talk, he began. His voice carried that specific, heavy tone people adopt right before they drop a hammer. You mingled with the weight of someone who feels guilty but intends to do it anyway. What's happening, Donnie? I asked, bracing myself. I was approached by a new outfit yesterday, Whitmore Commercial Services.
15.
They're offering to undercut your current rate by 15% and have offered me a binding 2-year contract. They've promised a full maintenance package with an emergency response guarantee that covers everything.
Fig.
They came in with a slick high-end presentation, he explained. My stomach dropped, leaving me feeling like id just stepped off a ledge in the dark.
Whitmore Commercial Services?
I repeated, the name tasting like ash. Yeah,
You've heard of them.
I knew them all too well now. Ian Whitmore. The same guy currently unpacking my wife's suitcases at whatever overpriced condo he called home.
Then just stealing my wife.
He was coming for my livelihood, too. Did their sales rep happen to mention where they obtained your contact details, Donnie? I asked, my voice dangerously calm. Now that you mention it. Yeah,
Fin.
they claimed they were referred by a mutual connection. Someone who knew our service history and our maintenance intervals and figured we'd be a perfect fit for their premium offering. I figured it was just standard sales fluff.
He added.
It wasn't just sales fluff. It was my own wife handing them the keys to my professional life, one client at a time. Donnie, I've serviced your dealerships for 4 years, I said, fighting to keep the tremor out of my voice. I've never missed a single call. I've never left you stranded on a weekend. And I've never once used supply chain excuses to explain away a slow response time. I know, Nolan,
Why I'm calling you first.
he said softly. But 15% is a significant margin, and I have shareholders to answer to. I have a board that scrutinizes every single line item on the quarterly reports.
Give me a week.
I pleaded. Let me put together a counteroffer, something that respects both of our bottom lines. You have until Friday, but I need something concrete. Nolano more promises, just a solid plan.
Fret.
I hung up the phone and sat in the silence of my office, the pieces clicking together with sickening precision.
Executing a surgical strike on my most profitable accounts.
Using insider intelligence he couldn't possibly have obtained legally. And Ava was undoubtedly the mole. Hector appeared in the doorway again.
Bad news.
Whitmore Commercial Services just tried to poach Donnie, I said. Whitmore? That's the real estate mogul, right? The guy with the billboards on every corner. The very same.
Finn, and he's the same guy my wife left me for.
Hector went deathly quiet for a moment. Do you want me to accidentally drop a heavy-duty toolbox on his luxury sedan? I know a guy who knows exactly where he parks. He offered.
You narrowing.
Tempting, I said, forcing a faint, humorless smile. But no, I stood up, the fire of resolve replacing the shock. I need to know how he got Donnie's contact information.
You know, every other
Move he's made while I was busy looking the other way. Dot. The answer arrived 3 days later, and it was far more devastating than anything I could have imagined.
Eating.
Ava had been feeding my proprietary client lists to E-Ions for months. I discovered it through my accountant, Ruthann, an incredibly detail-oriented woman who had managed my books since the day I opened.
Thank you.
She had noticed anomalies in the email system logs while reconciling the quarterly invoices. Someone has been accessing your CRM system 17 times in the last 60 days from an IP address that doesn't match your office.
Your home. Or any of your registered devices.
Ruthann said, sliding a printed report across her desk.
Hint.
The login credentials used were those of your wife, the ones you granted her 2 years ago, so she could assist with the billing during the peak season. I stared at the printout, watching the dates, the specific times,
Files.
that had been compromised. Client contact details, contract expirations dates, service histories. Pricing tiers.
Vendor contracts, everything.
A competitor would need to systematically dismantle my entire customer base. She was feeding him my business. Piece by piece, I whispered. The betrayal burning in my chest. Ruthann nodded slowly.
Systematically.
She confirmed, for at least 5 months. And there is something else, she added, pulling out a second document with the expression of a person about to deliver a fatal blow. 3 weeks ago, someone applied for a commercial credit line in your company's name. The application utilized your tax ID and your business address. It was denied due to a fraud alert triggered by your bank. But the attempt is now officially on record. They tried to open a line of credit using my identity, using the company name, and because I'm a sole proprietor. It would have been legally indistinguishable from me.
Things in you.
If it had been approved, they could have racked up massive debt that would have become my legal and financial nightmare. My own wife had been sabotaging me while sharing my bed, whispering endearments, while simultaneously stripping my business for parts. Ian Whitmore wasn't just a romantic escape. He was her partner in a calculated effort to destroy everything I had worked a decade to build. I sat there, the weight of the betrayal settling in, and began to build my case. I would document every transgression, save every digital footprint, and archive every timestamp of their treachery.
Wasn't just coming.
I was going to hand-deliver it to their front door. The silence in the conference room was heavy thick with the scent of stale coffee and the finality of a life being dismantled. Ava sat across from me, her lawyer beside her, radiating a smug confidence that only someone who believes they have successfully pulled off the perfect heist could possess. She thought she had ruined me. She believed that taking the house, the car, and the luxury vacations was the ultimate checkmate. I looked at her, then at my own attorney, Joanna, a woman whose reputation as a legal shark was earned in blood and courtroom victories. I had already signed the papers. The divorce was finalized, and by all appearances, I had been cleaned out.
I had signed over the deed to our home,
the keys to her imported sous vide, and every single sentimental item we had accumulated over 8 long, wasted years. Her lawyer looked at me with a mix of pity and confusion, clearly wondering why I hadn't fought for a single cent of our shared equity. As they stood up to leave, gloating in their supposed victory, Joanna leaned back, a small, knowing smile playing on her lips. Once the door clicked shut, leaving us in the quiet of the office, she looked at me. You realize that mortgage is going to crush her within 6 months, she said, her voice calm and calculated. I nodded, feeling the cold.
Hard way to plan settling into place.
Ava had taken the lifestyle, but she hadn't realized that the lifestyle was funded by a foundation she had just helped me systematically destroy. I had kept the business. I had kept the client database, the contracts, and, more importantly, the debtor what she thought was debt. In reality, it was the only asset that actually generated revenue.
Focus shifted immediately
to the next phase of the operation. I needed to document everything. Every attempt they had made to poach my clients, every unauthorized access to my server, and every timestamp of their betrayal was being logged. Ruthann, my assistant, had been working tirelessly, building a file that grew thicker with every passing week. Keep at it, I told her one Tuesday,
You. When we are ready to move,
we are going to strike hard and leave them with nothing. Life at the shop became my only sanctuary. Hector, my lead technician, had stepped up in a way I hadn't anticipated.
he just show up.
He took charge, managing the schedule and training two new, competent techs who actually treated the work with respect. One Saturday evening,
Lieutenant.
long after the sun had set and the city of Tampa was humming with weekend energy, we were still at the office. You are working too hard, boss, Hector said, handing me a container of rice and beans prepared by his wife, Rosa.
In the blood.
He added, with a grin. My grandfather worked until he was 87, and he never let a setback define him. He leaned against the workbench, his expression turning serious.
What it's like to deal with a snake in the grass.
My brother-in-law did the same thing to my sister years ago. He thought he was smart, living the high life while he drained her accounts. But today,
Think.
he's selling used cars in a dying studio apartment, and my sister owns 3 rental properties. Justice has a way of finding its way back around. His words struck a chord. I wasn't just working to save a business. I was working to build a fortress of evidence. 2 months post-divorce. My phone buzzed with an unknown number. It was Sloanova's best friend since college,
We met at a diner.
near the hospital where she worked as an nurse. She looked exhausted, the kind of tired that sleep couldn't fix. Ava told me everything 3 days before she left you, Sloan said.
Free not wasting time with pleasantries.
She expected me to be happy for her. She wanted me to store her boxes so you wouldn't catch on to her escape plan. I stared at her, my pulse quickening. What did you tell her? I asked.
Feet.
I told her she was a monster, Sloan replied, her voice trembling with genuine disgust. We had been friends for 15 years, but she was a stranger to me in that moment.
He cut me off because I wouldn't celebrate her betrayal.
She reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. She was so arrogant, Nolan. She bragged about everything. In these texts, the business plan, the timing,
The chat.
how she and Ian were going to bleed your systems dry. She thought she was as a mastermind. She slid the phone across the table. The screens were all their months of discussions about restructuring the client pipeline,
Things.
leveraging my operational framework, and systematically dismantling my life from the inside out. I felt a surge of cold fury, followed by a strange, liberating clarity. Why give me this? I asked. Because I hate being played,
He said.
and because I want to see her face when she realizes she didn't win anything. That night, I forwarded everything to Joanna. She called it the smoking gun. Know that, premeditation, intent. The trap was finally set.
Few net born.
The following month, during a scheduled business audit that Ian Whitmore thought was just routine, the walls finally closed in. They weren't expecting a forensic investigation,
Certainly weren't.
expecting the mountain of digital evidence proving the theft of trade secrets and the deliberate sabotage of my company. I walked into the conference room where Ian and Ava were sitting
Faces pale.
as they looked at the documents spread across the table. You thought you were smarter than the system? I said, my voice steady, devoid of the hurt I had carried for months. But you forgot one thing.
Foundation built on lies can never support a life.
Ian tried to stammer out an excuse, but his voice cracked. Ava didn't even look at me. She was looking at the papers,
Realizing
that the house she couldn't afford and the car she couldn't maintain were now the least of her worries. Legal action followed, swift and devastating. The court didn't just rule in my favor, it shredded their credibility.
you.
The business was returned to my sole control, and the settlement she had clawed for was clawed back 10 times over in damages and legal fees. A week later, I saw a post on social media. Ava had moved out.
Thinks it.
The house was on the market, listed for a price far lower than what she had bragged about. I didn't gloat. I didn't send a message. I simply focused on the work, surrounded by a team that actually cared,
Vision.
and a life that was finally mine again. As Hector reminded me, justice is a slow-moving river, but it always reaches the sea. And sitting there in my office, watching the city lights of Tampa, I finally felt at peace.
Reddit.
I had rebuilt from the ashes. This time, the structure was impenetrable. It wasn't a whirlwind romance, not at the beginning anyway. It was just two people who had been systematically dismantled by the same person, finding a quiet, hollow sort of comfort in trading notes. She would send me a quick text whenever Ava posted something particularly infuriating on social media. I'd ping her whenever my legal team hit a new milestone in the case. Coffee at a local shop turned into long, tired dinners at her apartment. Dinners eventually turned into something that felt like a lifeline.
Son.
Sloane didn't want to fix me. She didn't want to change my routine. And she certainly didn't expect me to be someone I wasn't. She just wanted a man who showed up when he said he would.
Thing.
And who told the truth, even when the air in the room got heavy and uncomfortable. You know she is going to lose her mind when she finds out about us, Sloane said one night, swirling a piece of pad thai on her fork.
You is going to view this as the ultimate betrayal.
She'll think it's worse than the time I refused to help her hide those boxes. When you gave me the evidence of her fraud, that wasn't a betrayal, Nolan. That was justice.
She pointed her chopsticks between us.
Her expression grave. But this is personal. She will never forgive either of us for this. I took a slow breath and looked at her. Can you live with that kind of heat?
I've been living with the fallout.
Ever since she asked me to help her lie to you. But besides, some friendships are just meant to end in flames. And for what it's worth, you are significantly better company than she ever was.
Pen.
6 months after the ink dried on the divorce papers, I received a phone call that would fundamentally alter the trajectory of my life. It was Donnie Briggs on the other end of the line.
Tate.
He was the same client that Ian had desperately tried to poach with that shady 15 discount offer, back when everything first started crumbling. I had convinced him to stay with me by matching the price and adding a layer of extended emergency coverage that Ian couldn't touch. Nolan, you need to get to my office immediately, Donnie said, his voice unusually tight.
Brent, and bring that lawyer of yours, if she's available.
I called Joanna, and we drove to Donnie's dealership in silence, both of us sensing the shift in the wind. He was waiting in his office, massive stack of folders dominating his desk, wearing an expression I had never seen on him before. Donnie was usually the kind of guy who lived for handshakes, golf jokes, and easy smiles. Today, he looked like a man staring into an abyss. 6 months ago, I was inches away from signing a long-term contract with Whitmore Commercial Services. I remember, I said softly.
Fenton.
You also remember that 3 of my closest competitors in this market actually did sign with them. Guys I've known for 20 years. We share vendor contacts, we discuss industry trends at chamber meetings, and we've referred clients to one another since we started out. I remember that, I repeated. It was the single biggest mistake any of them ever made. He slid the heavy folders across the mahogany desk. Take a good look. First folder was packed with invoices, and my stomach turned as I scanned the pages. There were service calls billed for work that had absolutely never happened. There were charges for high-end parts that were never installed in any unit. There were labor hours logged that didn't match a single dispatch record in their own digital system. He's been billing them for ghosts, Donnie said. His voice low. Techs that never stepped foot on the property and parts that never left the shelf. One of my buddies runs a restaurant supply company on the other side of town. His invoices showed monthly filter changes on units that hadn't been touched in over half a year. He only caught it when his walk-in freezer died completely and the repair guy from a different firm found the original.
Filter sitting right there, choked with dust.
He had paid for 6 monthly changes, and yet not a single one was ever performed. I flipped through the pages, my mind racing. The scope of this was absolutely insane. How much are we talking about, Donnie? Just from the 3 guys I know personally, over 50 grand. In clear overbilling across just 6 months, and that is only what they've managed to catch and prove so far. Joanna leaned forward, her eyes narrowing as she studied the documentation. Are these business owners willing to put this into an affidavit? Are they willing to testify? They are more through than willing, Donnie said.
Furious.
Donnie pulled a final folder from the stack, his hand trembling slightly. But this is where it gets truly interesting. I started asking around, talking to other business owners who jumped ship to Whitmore because of his unbeatable discount. It was the same story everywhere.
Uh, uh.
Phantom service calls, insane markups on basic parts, and work that was strictly theoretical.
Friend.
How many businesses are we looking at total? At least 12 that I've spoken to so far.
Probably dozens more that haven't
Even realized they're being bled dry. Yet, because they haven't had a major equipment failure to expose the fraud. I looked at the invoices again, and then I saw it.
Formatting was hauntingly familiar.
The service codes were identical to mine. Ian hadn't just stolen my clients, he had pilfered my entire invoice template, my internal documentation system,
Use 'em.
and my entire philosophy of business. And Ava had been the one to hand him the keys to the kingdom. One more thing, Donnie said, sliding a single sheet of paper toward me.
Feed.
This is a copy of the Whitmore Commercial Services Alcides registration from the state.
Look at the registered members.
I looked, and the breath left my lungs. There were 2 registered members listed, Ian Whitmore,
The managing member.
and Ava Cole, listed as a 20 equity partner. Not Ava Whitmore, not her maiden name. Ava Cole. She was still legally attached to me when this company was formed.
When was this filed?
Joanna asked,
You.
her voice sharp as a razor. 3 months before she left him. She was a founding partner of his company while she was still living in our house, while she was still pretending to be my wife. 3 months of meticulous planning. Joanna noted. This is organized fraud, wire fraud, potentially, given the electronic nature of the payments. And with her name explicitly on the LNC,
He is personally liable for every cent.
she isn't just an accomplice. She is a principal owner and founding partner. Joanna turned to look at me, her gaze steady. What do you want to do? I looked at Donnie.
Resolve. Hardening like steel.
How many of those businesses are ready to go to war? How many will sign, and how many will testify? Donnie didn't hesitate for a second. I'll make the calls tonight. We coordinate,
We consolidate. And we file this together.
more voices.
More power.
That night, I sat in my apartment with the folders spread across the kitchen table like a battlefield map. She had looked me in the eyes for months,
Faring meals and conversation.
while simultaneously constructing the very trap meant to bury me alive. Building a fraud case takes time, patience, and surgical documentation. Joanna brought in a forensic accountant named
Figsy.
a man who spent a full month picking apart every single invoice Whitmore Commercial Services had ever generated. The guy built spreadsheets that looked like beautiful, complex modern art,
Thing.
uncovering patterns that no one else would have ever noticed. Across all 12 businesses that eventually came forward, the pattern was chillingly identical. Billing for services that never occurred.
Egu.
Parts markups of over 200 on materials that cost a fraction of what they charged. Labor hours for technicians who weren't even on the payroll on the dates listed.
Fact.
The total documented fraud was just under $350,000 across 18 months of operation. The mask was off, the system was exposed, and for the first time in a long time,
Fry knew exactly how this story would end.
But the air in the office was thick with the scent of stale coffee and the weight of a year's worth of betrayal. I stared at the document spread across the desk,
Thingin'.
the numbers screaming a story of pure, unadulterated greed. The audits didn't lie. They were billing for parts that cost a fraction of what they charged the clients.
Fimmed.
Labor was being billed for technicians who hadn't even worked for the company on the dates listed. It was a systematic, calculated fraud. Nearly $350,000 vanished into their pockets over 18 months.
That was just from the brave few willing to testify.
My lead investigator leaned back in his chair, his eyes tired but sharp. Ian Whitmore didn't just stumble into this. Ian, he said, using my name as if to ground me.
Fushing.
The real damage is likely closer to $500,000. Then there was the final nail in the coffin. The screenshot Sloan had handed over.
Feels a trail.
Was a trail of text messages proving Ava knew exactly what was happening. long before she walked out on our marriage. Timestamps revealed she was orchestrating the theft of our clients while she was still wearing my ring.
Yuzu.
My lawyer, Joanna, looked at the evidence and let out a long, slow breath. This is the difference between a simple error and a planned crime, she noted. They didn't just cut corners, they built a business model out of fraud.
Thing.
She saw the rage simmering beneath my surface and warned me. We could file a civil suit, but if you want to see them fall, we need to bring the state in. I didn't hesitate. Do it. For 6 weeks, the silence was deafening.
Phew.
The state's fraud division was drowning in a backlog of insurance scams, and our case was buried under 30 other files. Every time Joanna called for an update, the answer was the same: reviewing.
Thing.
My patience was hanging by a thread, and then the first domino started to wobble. A business owner named Santos, who had been our loudest ally, suddenly went quiet. When I finally got him on the phone, his voice was shaky.
Freeze, I can't do this, man.
He whispered. I have 3 dry cleaners to run. I can spend the next 2 years in depositions and courtrooms. I tried to reason with him. Ivan stole $8,000 from you.
Vent.
Santos, that money is gone. But if you back out, he wins. It took Donnie, a friend who had been helping me rally the victims, an entire week of dinners, and promises to pull him back in. We were fighting a war on 2 fronts.
Fear the legal system and the fear of those we were trying to help.
By the 8th month, momentum shifted. Former clients, seeing the cracks in the Whitmore facade, began to return, one by one.
Vince.
They signed statements detailing equipment failures and bills for services that never happened. One laundromat owner told me, with tears of fury in his eyes, that his dryer vents hadn't been cleaned in 18 months.
Fire hazard.
I could have lost everything, he spat. I'll testify twice if I have to. Meanwhile, Ian and Ava were living in a fantasy world. They posted their extravagant lifestyle on social media,
Fix.
parading a new car and a down payment on a gated community house. Ava's engagement photos were everywhere, each angle carefully curated to show off the ring Iwan bought with stolen money. One morning,
Cute.
Hector showed me their latest announcement. The caption read, "Finally finding my person after years of settling." Settling? Hector laughed, a dry, bitter sound. She called 8 years with you settling.
You were just a placeholder.
I felt a cold, calm wash over me. My wife, Rosa, had her own way of dealing with it. She knows someone at the county clerk's office, she told me, a mischievous glint in her eye.
He can make their permits a nightmare.
Justice, I realized, was a tapestry woven from many different threads. Then, on a crisp Tuesday morning, the call came. Joanna's voice was electric.
Dean, it's happening.
The state has launched an official investigation. Subpoenas are going out today. I hung up the phone, and for the first time in 18 months, I breathed. The aftermath was glorious. Within 3 days,
Fiend jetted.
the Whitmore Commercial Services website vanished into the digital ether. Their phones went dead. The fleet of vans, once a constant sight in Tampa, began to disappear. I drove past Ian's office and saw the parking lot empty,
Fave for 2 Vansone abandoned with a flat tire.
the other wearing a for sale sign. Donnie called, his voice booming with satisfaction. Clients are jumping ship.
Vid.
They're demanding audits on every single invoice. Nobody wants to be the one who signed a contract with a criminal. How is he handling it? I asked. He's losing his mind, Donnie chuckled.
Showed up.
At one of the client offices yesterday, screaming about conspiracies and sabotage. I leaned back, watching the sunset bleed across the Floridas.
Easy.
The man who thought he could build an empire on lies was watching it crumble into dust. He didn't lose because of me. He lost because he couldn't stop being who he really was, and justice.
Fenf.
Justice once just a verdict in a courtroom. It was the sight of a fraudster screaming at a brick wall while the world moved on without him. The game was over, and I had finally won.
Crumbs of every single invoice were relentless.
How was Ian handling the pressure? Not well, to put it mildly. He showed up at one of the other business owners' offices yesterday, screaming about some elaborate conspiracy. He was ranting about how everyone was sabotaging his life, acting like he was the victim of a grand, hidden plot. The building manager eventually had to call security to drag him out.
Fingsham.
The manager told him point blank that if he ever set foot on the property again, the police would be waiting. 2 weeks after that, my phone lit up with a name I hadn't seen in months. Ava.
First time she had reached out since our divorce was finalized.
I let it ring. When she called again, I just watched the screen until it went dark. The third time, she finally left a voicemail. Nolan,
You know,
you're the one behind all of this, she said, her voice shaking. And I know, Sloan helped you pull it off. My own best friend turned her back on me for your sake. 15 years of friendship.
be warned.
And she stabbed me in the back just to stay on your side. You need to make this stop right now, Nolan. Please, I'm begging you. Everything is falling apart. Ian is completely losing his mind.
The investigators are calling my place of work.
And my boss is asking uncomfortable questions. You have to call this off. I saved that voicemail for documentation, just like Joanna suggested. It might come in handy later.
Thin.
I permanently deleted was contact information from my phone for my own peace of mind. 2 days later, Ian showed up at my shop. His eyes looked like they hadn't seen real sleep in weeks.
Feud.
He walked through my front door like he owned the place, while 2 of my techs at the counter stopped working to stare. Hector moved to cut him off, but I signaled him to stand down.
Think.
I was going to let the guy dig his own hole. You think you're so clever, Ian said, his voice echoing off the walls. You think you've outsmarted me. But I see exactly what you're doing.
Feeding information to the investigators. Trying to destroy everything I've built.
I stayed seated behind my desk, keeping my voice calm and steady. Everything you built.
Business you built using my client lists and my invoice templates.
The system my wife stole. Ava and I are partners, equal partners. He spat back. She had every right to bring her expertise to our company.
Them straight in the eye.
Her expertise was being married to mine, and that doesn't transfer. His face turned a deep, furious shade of red. He took a menacing step toward my desk. Ruiz, one of my techs,
From his chair without saying a word.
he didn't need to speak. He just stood there as a silent reminder. Ian noticed.
This isn't over.
He snarled. I have lawyers and resources you can't even imagine.
You think some small-time Huac guy can take me down?
I don't have to take you down, Ewan. You already did that to yourself. I just wrote it all down. He left without another word. He slammed the door hard enough to rattle the windows. Ian's legal nightmare dragged on for months. That's how justice actually works in the real world. It's just endless paperwork, depositions, delays, and lawyers charging by the hour. The forensic accountant testified, walking through every single fraudulent invoice and every fake service call. He used charts and graphs that made the scam impossible to deny. 347.
Theroed in documented fraud across 12 different local businesses.
At one point, Way pointed out an invoice charging $800 for a capacitor that costs $45 retail. Ian's lawyer tried to object, but the judge overruled him instantly.
Finged.
Donnie testified next. Then, 3 other business owners took the stand. They talked about the trust that had been shattered.
E-Trify.
They spoke about the money they would never see again and the realization that they'd been played by a man who smiled while picking their pockets. I didn't testify at all. I didn't need to.
Did all the talking for me.
Ian's lawyer tried to claim miscommunication and business inexperience. He said his client was just a real estate guy who didn't understand how the vac industry worked.
Massive billing errors.
Honest mistakes, not intentional fraud. Nobody in that courtroom bought it for a second. The state hit him with multiple counts of fraud and theft.
It was the kind of charge that stacks up.
When you've been running the same scam on 12 businesses for 18 months. He tried to fight it at first, demanding a full trial. Then,
From it.
his lawyer finally explained what happens when you go to trial with a mountain of evidence stacked against you. The plea deal he eventually took wasn't generous. But it was better than what the judge would have handed down if he'd lost at trial. He got real time in prison. Not decades, but enough to matter.
Time to sit in a cold cell and think about all the clever moves that led him to that moment.
He was hit with a restitution order he would be paying off for the rest of his life.
Plus, be allowed to run
A licensed business in this state ever again. His fancy house went to foreclosure while he waited for sentencing. His car was repossessed.
fees.
The engagement ring he'd used to propose to Ava was returned for whatever tiny fraction of cash the jeweler offered. Ava took a plea deal of her own.
Think.
Her lawyer convinced her that a jury would have no sympathy for a woman who helped rip off local businesses while cheating on her own husband. She got probation, community service,
Due to chief fault.
and a restitution bill that would follow her for years. The interior design career shed been building during our marriage collapsed. The second potential clients Googled her name and found the court records.
Fees known.
I heard through Sloan that Ava tried to start over under her maiden name. It didn't work. Someone in the local design community recognized her at a trade show and made sure everyone knew exactly who she was.
Feel.
Small industries have very long memories. And the house. The one she demanded in the divorce. The one she thought was her ticket to freedom. The mortgage was in her name alone.
I had made absolutely sure of that during the settlement.
She couldn't afford the payments on what she made, and Ian's money had completely disappeared into legal fees and frozen accounts.
He missed 3 payments in 4 months.
She finally put it on the market the week after Ian's sentencing, listed at 25 below what Wed originally paid. She still couldn't find a buyer. Foreclosure properties flood the market.
He wants to pay full price for someone else's desperate mistake.
Hector brought me the listing printout with a grin. It was the same house, now underwater by at least 30,000. There is justice in the world, after all.
Frim. I didn't buy the house back.
I didn't want it. I didn't need the satisfaction of owning something from a past I had already left behind. My business doubled in the year after Ian's conviction.
Thing Tatum.
I didn't need any special tricks or clever schemes. I just showed up, did the work, and treated people like they actually mattered. They say the best revenge is living well.
Think the best revenge is watching the people who tried to bury.
You realize that you didn't just survive.
You thrived.
My name is Nolan, and for a long time, I was just a ghost in my own company, each watching Ian Whitmore and his partner, Ava, called dismantle everything I had built with my bare hands. Ian thought he was the smartest guy in the room, systematically squeezing me out of Whitmore Commercial Services,
Thick.
turning my own employees against me and framing me for fraud. He wanted me gone so he could collect the insurance money and walk away with the keys to the kingdom. But he made one critical mistake.
Are estimated the loyalty of the people who actually did the hard labor.
After Ian was finally convicted and sent away, the silence in the office was deafening, but it was a fresh start. I didn't take over. I rebuilt.
Piece by piece. Day by day.
I made sure that every client knew that the fraud they heard about was a lie, and that the man behind the work was still standing.
Things.
The business didn't just survive, the scandal it doubled in size. Within a single year. It was simple, really. I showed up, I did the work, and I treated my techs and my clients like human beings, not just invoice numbers.
Fees.
Donnie Briggs, who had been my right hand through the darkest days, sent me 3 new high-profile referrals in the first 6 months alone. We grew from a skeleton crew to 24 employees, 4 brand new vans to the fleet, and finally moved out of that cramped converted closet into a real professional building. Life began to feel normal again. Or at least, the new version of normal. Sloan and I,
Being 10.
who had been through the fire together, finally took the step I had been waiting for. We got engaged. At the celebration, Hector, our lead contractor, gave a toast that brought tears to my eyes.
Butte.
He talked about how some people are just built different, how they play the long game while others burn bridges, and how the ultimate victory is creating a legacy that nobody can touch.
Felt like I had finally closed the book on the chapter.
Where Ian and Ava were the main characters. But fate, as it turns out, has a funny way of checking in when you least expect it. A month after the engagement,
Phone buzzed with an unknown number.
I opened the message, and my heart skipped a beat when I saw the name at the top. Ava, it read. I hope you're happy, Nolan. You ruined everything. she went on,
Fict.
blaming me for everything, for taking the business, for destroying her reputation, and for stealing her best friend, Sloane. She ended it with, I will never forgive either of you for what you did.
Fed.
I stared at that screen for what felt like an hour, the blue light reflecting in my eyes as the past tried to drag me back into the mud. My thumbs hovered over the keypad,
You.
and I thought about writing a manifesto explaining how she had helped Ian frame me, how she had watched me lose my livelihood, and how she was the architect of her own downfall,
Told her.
that she destroyed her own life, the moment she chose greed over integrity. But then, I realized something important. Explaining yourself to someone who wants to remain blind is a waste of time.
Peace.
I took a deep breath, cleared my head of all the bitterness, and typed just 3 simple words. You're welcome. Goodbye. I blocked the number, tossed the phone on the desk.
Turned back to the blueprints for the new warehouse expansion.
Some people spend their entire existence obsessing over how to get back at their enemies, looking for the perfect moment to strike or the perfect word to hurt.
Then that real revenge isn't
A fight, a lawsuit, or a public shaming. Real revenge is building something that lasts, something that grows and flourishes,
fickin'.
while the people who tried to tear you down are forced to watch from the sidelines, isolated by the wreckage of their own choices. Standing here today, stronger than ever,
Refuse to let their betrayal define my future.
guys, we are incredibly close to hitting that 100,000 subscriber milestone on this channel, and I couldn't have done this without your support. If you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, please consider doing so today. It really helps us keep these stories coming. Thank you for being part of this journey and for helping me make this dream a reality. Justice isn't always about a judge and a gavel sometimes. It's about having the last word and then simply walking away,